Welcome to the Week 9 NFL edition of the 211 Fast Break podcast. We're very excited here. It's the start of the NBA season on October the 29th, but we're also going to talk a little NFL with our NFL handicapper, Dan Erda. Dan, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. I never saw this coming, but I'm kind of a little bit excited for NBA also this year.
I hope we had a little something to do with it. There are
Yeah,
weekly talks, get a little
the weekly
Sixers, a little
talks,
NBA.
the stuff you post on the site, absolutely has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I know this is one of the nights I look forward to each year, and not only the NBA, but the Sixers themselves, which will be tomorrow night, although I don't look forward to seeing the Miami Heat smoke them by double digits. But,
Because Miami's playing on back-to-back nights, it might stay within 30.
yeah, I actually, in my post about the season preview, I said one good thing about the Sixers are going to be getting them on the end of a back-to-back night against a rugged Chicago team. The bad thing is the Miami Heat have the players we have, and we have the players we have. So that's a really big talent disparity, and I would expect Miami to roll. So getting into NFL, you had a very successful Week 8. You were 5-0, bringing up your record on the year to 25-10-2. That's a 71.4 winning percentage. We'll talk about the one very close call as we dive into your first pick last week, which was a three-team teaser. You had San Fran -6.5, New Orleans -2. Those both covered pretty easily. Buffalo put up a little bit of a fight, but Saints and Drew Brees were very formidable in that contest. But the game of the week, on your slate at least, was the Seattle Pick'em, which came down to a Kellen Clemens goal-to-go situation in the final minute. What was going through your head there?
I mean, first off, the Rams and game of the week should never be said in the same sentence, no matter what, ever.
You gotta admit, that last minute was very exciting.
I was watching it, and I was just like, really? Is this really what's going to be what screws up the perfect week? And then luckily, Seattle's defense decided to start playing with about 5 seconds left in the game. They stopped them 2 times, and I got the win. But I think Seattle just didn't take St. Louis seriously at all, and didn't really show up to the game, and that's why it was so close.
Was this another situation where Seattle is just not the same team on the road, or do you think this is just more of a fluke?
A combination of both. I still trust them at home like 20 times more than I trust them on the road. But I also think that if they wanted to, if they wanted to do better, if they were a little more pumped up for the game, they can play a lot better than they played last night.
Yeah, I agree. Probably looking a little past the Rams, especially with everybody counting them out, with Sam Bradford out for the year.
Looking ahead to the mighty Buccaneers they play this week.
Yeah, a lot of trap games when you got the Tampa Bay Bucks next on the schedule. But that did manage to squeak by for you, and that three-team teaser was your first successful win on your Week 8 slate. Next, we'll move along to you had Oakland +3, and you said you liked them even to win outright, but you're taking the points, and lo and behold, they did win outright. 21-18 over the Steelers. That Terrell Pryor touchdown to start the game, not only was that the longest TD in Raiders history, which eclipsed the Bo Jackson 92-yard touchdown, but it was also the longest run by any quarterback in NFL history. So very impressive play. Great play call by the coaches. They must have saw something in the scouting, and the Steelers, there's nobody on the side
There's
of the field.
nobody. You could even see the amazement in Terrell Pryor's face when he saw that there was absolutely nobody around him, and he was actually going to score.
Yeah, Ryan Clark was the deep safety, and he didn't even recognize that Pryor had the ball until he was 20 yards downfield.
On that play, Terrell Pryor scored 15 fantasy points, and Terrell Pryor finished the day with 15 fantasy points.
Yes, I did see that. He threw for under 100 yards and had 2 interceptions the rest of the game, but the Oakland defense had 5 sacks and 2 interceptions of Ben Roethlisberger. As we talked about, that O-line for the Steelers just very porous. And
they lost 3 more guys this week too. They're falling like it's crazy. They're going to be picking guys up off the street to play.
So a little foreshadowing maybe in that one. So you had Oakland +3. They won the game, so that was their second win on the week. We'll move along to Arizona -2.5. And you keep betting on these Cardinals at home, and they keep paying off for you, huh?
I think I'm 4-0 on the ones where you go on record as saying that you're against me and do not agree.
It's only 3
Only 3-0.
Yeah, for everybody out there, I do win my bets.
Sometimes.
I just not the three we've gone head to head with Dan's here.
Two of them have been the Cardinals.
Yeah, I just maybe I got to change my opinion on the Cardinals. I think Andre Ellington getting more of a featured role played a big role in that.
Heck, took him so long to do that.
I don't know. I mean, on that 80-yard touchdown run, he looked electric, and that's something Rashard Mendenhall hasn't looked since the Illinois days.
They still don't. They're still not committing to giving him a full workload. They still have gone on. The coaching staff has gone on record as saying that they still consider him a guy who's better in small doses, which is funny. That's kind of what Kansas City thought of Jamal Charles the first 2 years of his career.
Yeah, he's a running back, and I just think he can handle whatever you can give him.
Yeah, and he looks really, really good. And
What's the difference between 18 touches and 25? I mean, over the course of a career, sure, that adds up, but in any given game, I think guys at the professional level can handle it.
I like that guy. I think he's a playmaker. I think he's a guy. If they do commit to him, he could be real good.
So yeah, great performance by him and the Cardinals in general, as that defense picked off Matt Ryan 4 times and also had 4 sacks of their own. So the Falcons O line is just also similar to Pittsburgh, just got a lot of replacements playing right now, and with that coupled with the receiver injuries, they just don't look like the same team.
It's a real bad season for them. I mean, they're about ready to throw in the towel and go for a draft pick too. There's no point to. I mean, they're just going to pack it in.
Yeah, I mean, they're only at 2 wins at this point, so you can't see them competing. They're definitely not going to catch up to the Saints at this point, so you got to look ahead to the wild card, and there's some good teams competing for that. So I agree. They're going to get to a point where they just pack it in and start seeing what some younger guys on the roster can do, maybe. So that was the third win of the week for you. We'll go along to the Dallas-Detroit game. You had over 51. Going into the fourth quarter, it was Dallas 13, Detroit 7.
Well, at halftime, it was 10-7. And what I did during halftime was I started to think about whether or not I was going to make excuses and think that I should have won that game. Because at halftime, the Lions had 346 yards of offense, and the Cowboys had 134. And the score was 10-7. It was completely ridiculous. But it was looking bad. I was ready to take that one and just write it off as a loss.
Yeah, watching that game, it seemed like every possession a team would move the ball and then there would be a turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time Detroit got to the Dallas 40, 35-yard line, something would happen. You know, there was the fluke Stafford interception, and there was the one where Calvin fumbled it. And
it's easy to forget that Calvin Johnson had a fumble.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the fourth quarter happened, and Calvin Johnson just really started piling on what had already been a great day. He ended up with the 329 total receiving yards, second all-time. He actually outgained 15 entire teams himself last week.
Oh, man, that's insane.
So really historic performance from Calvin Johnson, and every bit was needed as the Detroit Lions only won by 1 in the waning seconds off that really heady play by Matthew Stafford.
Which, if he got tackled and time ran out, would be considered one of the dumbest plays of the year.
Yep.
But because he scored, it's always results oriented.
Yeah, the 2020 hindsight, sports media would have had a field day with that if the result hadn't worked out in his favor. But fortunately for him and the Lions, it did. So that huge fourth quarter explosion by both teams did carry the day and get you that over.
Yeah, it's crazy because I had 51 and it closed at 51 and a half. And there was a point in the fourth quarter where it was on 51.
Yes.
And all I kept thinking was, thank God I got that hook. And then, lo and behold, they scored 10 more points after that.
Yeah, really blowing that initial number out of the water. And we'll move on to the fifth game of your slate last week, which was kind of a similar situation where you had the Redskins and the Broncos over 57. That was another game which was 7-7 at halftime. So really not on pace to cover the over in that one either. But then Broncos go ahead and score, about 30-some points unanswered.
I think they scored the last 38 points of the game.
Yeah, and it ends up covering pretty easily at 45-21. Anything you can take away from that game?
I mean, the Denver overs, just keep betting them.
Yeah, they've progressively been hitting nearly every week, and the numbers are just really high.
And it doesn't matter how high the numbers are.
They can't set them high enough at this point, yeah. We saw a 59 with the Eagles cover, and now it's 57 with the Redskins cover.
Dallas one cover, that was in the 50s.
Yeah, so just the bookmakers are trying to adjust to what's a historic Denver offensive attack, but they're just unable to keep pace with this.
It's kind of weird what's going on in the whole sports betting industry right now, because heavy favorites and overs the books can't set these lines high enough to get the public off of them. You look in college, they can't set Oregon lines high enough. They can't set Florida State lines high enough. And then in college and pros, they can't set these over-unders high enough because you can't make an over-under 63. You can't do that.
Not in the NFL. Yeah.
Correct. Well, in college, you absolutely can.
Right.
And all these numbers that they keep on pushing, the public keeps on betting on all these teams, and they keep on hitting.
So, I mean, Oregon and the Florida State lines they've been setting, which if they've been playing top 25 teams and they're still favored by 30, it's
Florida State's playing the number 7 team in the country this week, and they're 23.5-point favorites.
Yeah, it's the largest spread for two top 10 teams playing each other.
And I like Florida State.
In NCAA history, it's the largest spread between at this point in the season.
And it carries over to the NFL too. On Sunday, double-digit favorites for 4-0 against the spread. Only Seattle last night didn't cover.
Yep. So favorites and overs have been seeming to hit a lot this season, and the bookmakers are still trying to catch up to that trend.
And until it adjusts itself, we'll ride the wave.
Absolutely. So that was a 5-0 week for you last week. Very impressive stuff. We'll move on to your Week 9 slate. You have 3 plays on the docket. The first one is, once again, you're going with those New Orleans Saints, minus 4.5 at the New York Jets. Now, the Jets have been a very zigzag team throughout the year. They've gone every other week with wins and losses up to this point. So this would be a win week
where they play well.
But you're going against that trend. What do you see here?
And they're back at home where they generally play well. And there's a lot, and this is definitely going to be a public team too. I know. I bet you anything 70-75% end up on the Saints. But this game just reminds me of the San Francisco-Tennessee game that we won on 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have a team, like at that point, the Titans had a pretty decent record, and right now the Jets still have a respectable record, but they're not that good. I think that the 3 or 4 wins that the Jets have are the fluke, and what we saw on Sunday 2 days ago was not a fluke. I think this team's bad. Their defense is not terrible, but it doesn't matter how good or bad a defense is. If you have David Nelson as your number 1 wide receiver and you have a young quarterback who throws interceptions, eventually you're going to get points scored on you.
Yeah, they're rolling out Bilal Powell and Chris Ivory and then Jeremy Curley and Jeff Cumberland at their skill positions. And it's just not a real explosive attack. And the defense is good, but when the offense is turning it over like they are or going 3 now, the defense is going to get tired. And even regardless of how good or bad the Jets may be, I just think the Saints team is one of the top 3 teams in the league. Drew Brees, we know what he can do, and he's doing it once again this season. 5 touchdowns last week, and that Saints defense has just been playing very solid. Rob Ryan has them playing some good ball, so I'd look for them to just run the ball with Pierre Thomas, get those guys on the outside going, throw those deep balls to Kenny Stills, and get Jimmy Graham working in the red zone, even if he has unlimited snaps.
Yeah, and the Jets are very bad against the tight end, too.
Yes. So I agree with you there. I think that number will probably rise as the week goes on and move.
I got this at 4.5 when it opened. Then it jumped to 5. Then it jumped to 5.5. Now it's back down at 5. In all seriousness, the gap between about 4 or 5 up to 6 isn't that big of a difference.
Until you get up to 6.
Yeah, and then when you get to 6, it's the whole thing. It would not surprise me at all if this ends at 6, though.
Yeah, I agree. So that's the first play of the week, New Orleans minus 4.5. The second you have is Cleveland plus 3 at home against the Ravens. So this is kind of a spot you've played before where you don't like the Ravens on the road. Is this your thinking there?
Yes, it's exactly what I'm thinking. Harbaugh has a great record off a bye, and that's the one thing that had me a little hesitant to pull the trigger on this one. But the Cleveland Browns have looked good in every game not started by Brandon Weeden. Whether it was Hoyer or, in last week's case, Jason Campbell. Anytime Brandon Weeden's not there to stink up the field, and a quarterback doesn't even have to be good, just has to be competent enough to let guys like Jordan Cameron and Josh Gordon just do their thing. They're a good team, and they can put up a couple points. I don't think that Baltimore is anything special at all. I don't think this game's going to be a blowout either way, but with a game that I could see within 3 points either way, I'm taking the points every time.
We didn't talk about this game, but I was just so shocked at how competent Jason Campbell
I
looked
was
last week.
shocked how
He's
good.
going against that Chiefs defense, number one defense in the league this season, and they were getting some pressure on him, but he was just escaping and ducking defenders, getting out of the pocket and making throws on the run. He just looked like a solid NFL quarterback, and after not really getting steady time over the last few years, I just didn't expect that from him, and he looked good.
And the one thing I said when I was discussing that with someone else the other day was I said like we do have a lot like years and years of watching Jason Campbell play that you can't let one game just change who you think he is because we know what Jason Campbell is. He's not a star, but I just think all they need is someone who can get the ball out quickly and who when the way Brandon Weeden threw the ball, he hung the receivers out to dry. So they were scared. They were scared to even go to catch the ball when he was throwing it to them because they were probably going to get decked.
Yeah.
What do you have? You have a guy who can get the ball out and can put the ball in the vicinity of them. They can go make plays, and Campbell did that. And I think that he's going to be able to do that against Baltimore too.
Yeah, I agree that the Cleveland team is a lot better than most people give them credit for. The defense has looked good on occasions this season. Just Baltimore coming off the bye is makes me hesitant.
Yeah,
So this is probably a no play for me. But
that's a solid. Harbaugh does very well off that. That's a solid reason to not play this game. Andy Reid was 8-0 the first 8 years of his career, coming off of buys, and then when the team got bad, that streak ended, and I think that's what happens in Baltimore. I think that team's just not that good anymore.
All right, fair enough. So Cleveland +3, your second play of the week. And then the third and final play of week 9, you have a two-team teaser, so the lines will be adjusted by 6 points. You have Carolina -1.5 at home against the Falcons, and New England -1 at home against the Steelers. So let's start with that second one first, where we just talked about Pittsburgh and how bad they looked against Oakland, and injuries just continue to mount. And New England looks to be, although the offense isn't clicking on all
I'm not
cylinders.
thrilled to be betting on them, but I think it tees down to 1. I like it a lot more.
Yeah, just
But
to win the game, and they're at home.
they definitely don't look like the Patriots of old, though.
No, they don't. And I don't know if that's due to Brady with that hand injury or just not being on the same page with all those new guys, even at this late point in the season.
A lot of it's been, even before the hand injury, a lot of it's just been Brady not making the throws he used to be able to make.
Yeah, a lot of overthrows on deep balls, and it's just something I know people that have watched Brady a lot over the years. They're saying he's not hitting those receivers downfield like he did in the early part of his career, and the announcers keep saying, "Oh, well, it's Brady. He'll eventually do it," and he does look great at times, like that game-winning touchdown to Ken Compton the one week. So he can certainly do it, but he's not doing it on a consistent basis. But against the Steelers, who
This is more of a bet against the Steelers
right.
on the road with more linemen down. They really can't get anything going this year.
Yeah, so I like New England certainly to win that outright at home. So getting them down to -1 is a good move in my opinion. So the other one you have Carolina's -1.5 at home against the Falcons. I'm done with the Falcons. I've seen enough. I'm officially off the they can turn things around bandwagon. They just got too many replacement players playing major roles for them that they didn't expect to at this point in the season based on injuries and what have you. And Carolina, they look good. Rivera's suddenly going for every fourth down he can. He recognizes they have a good rushing attack, and they'll pick up those 4th and 1, 4th and 2s. And that seems to have rejuvenated the offense.
Is this the week where they come back down to earth? Though I'm really scared of it. This is again just like the Pittsburgh game, a fade of Atlanta as much as it is a bet on Carolina. I just can't tell. I haven't decided yet with Carolina. If I think because they on the last couple of weeks, I know they played really crappy teams, but they've looked incredibly competent. They look like they can make a run in the playoffs, kind of good.
Yeah, they got a real solid defense led by Luke Kuechly, and then with Cam Newton being getting back to his power rushing kind of little read option attack that he did in the early part of his career, and then they for some reason got away from him at the beginning of the season. The offense has looked a lot better, and I agree they're not an upper echelon team. They really haven't proved it with that signature win that you like to see, but they're still an above average team at the very least, in my opinion, and we know that the Falcons aren't at this point.
And the defense is real good. I tell you one thing, I really wish they had gone. I mean, for their sake, I really don't care personally, but if they could have gotten a receiver today, that would have been great.
Yeah, I mean, NFL, it's always tough to make trades. Guys have to learn the playbook. Receiver is one of those positions that's a little easier than some because when it comes down to it, you're running the same basic 9 routes. It's
Mhm.
just what the terminology is. But yeah, a lot of teams hesitant to make those kind of big splash moves, but certainly Carolina, a team that's needed a second receiver for years, and they just haven't found one to go alongside Steve Smith.
So yeah, so those two teams that basically just have to win outright, or in the case of Carolina, by more than one. I think they can do that with relative ease.
All right, I agree with you on that one. So the 3 plays for Week 9, if you want to roll with Dan, he's 71% on the season. After all, he has New Orleans -4.5 at the Jets, Cleveland +3 at home against the Ravens, and a 2-team teaser with Carolina -1.5 against the Falcons and New England -1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that is it for the NFL portion of our podcast, but we do have the reader question segment of the show where we call it the Outlet Pass segment, a little assist from the readers. We do have a question from KMax732, back from vacation, giving us some of those good reader questions.
He always brings the real solid basketball questions.
Yep, and we like the basketball talk here at Philly Fast Break. So he asked us, is there a team in the East that is ready to challenge the Miami Heat and knock them off their perch of reaching a fourth straight finals on their way to try to three-peat as champions, but this would be their fourth straight finals appearance if they were able to come out of the East this year. So what are your thoughts on that, Dan?
Oh, you're the NBA guy. You go first with this one.
All right. I think this is there's a very good chance somebody can knock them off. At the very least, the Heat are only going to be as good as they were last year. Wade's older. He's starting to break down. Chris Bosh has been had a lot of nagging injuries over the last couple of years. LeBron's still going to be LeBron. He's going to be the best player in the league. But they lost Mike Miller, who, laugh on all you want about his bad back, and, he's Mike Miller. He's been in the league forever. All he does is shoot threes. But he was an essential part of their rotation in the finals last year.
He came up huge.
Yeah, without him, they don't beat the Spurs. So they lose him due to the tax. They had to amnesty him to get under that tax threshold. So they're trying to replace him with some combination of Michael Beasley and trying to rejuvenate his career, or Roger Mason Jr. Neither of those guys inspire any confidence in me.
Not at all.
So I think at the very best, the Heat are just going to be as good as they were last year, and they're probably going to be worse. So there's the Heat, and then you got two very elite challengers, in my opinion, in the Indiana Pacers and the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls, for years, they've been perennially the best defensive team in the league. That's still going to be there this season, and they're even going to be a little better with Jimmy Butler's emergence towards the end of last season, him getting more of a full-time role alongside Deng on the wings. And then you got Derrick Rose, who looks as explosive as ever in the preseason, which obviously it's just preseason, but if you're judging how well a guy drives to the hole and some of those highlight reel dunks he's pulling off, that's all you need to know that he's kind of over that knee injury that plagued him. And with Derrick Rose being back to in the MVP type discussion, and the rest of that Bulls team and the kind of defense they can play, I think they would give Miami all sorts of trouble in a 7-game series. And then with Indiana, we saw last year they took them to 7 games, and their biggest weakness was their bench last season. They actually beat the Heat in that series when the starters were on the floor, but they had an awful bench last season. Nobody can contribute. So they went out and they got Luis Scola, they got C.J. Watson to man the backup point, Ian Mahinmi to bang down low, Chris Copeland to help stretch the floor from the 4 position. So they recognized their biggest weakness. They went out and got some pieces to help correct that. And then if Danny Granger can give them anything at some point this season, then that's just a bonus. So 7 games last season, and they went and improved their team where the Heat might even be worse this season. I like Indiana or Chicago to potentially knock off Miami in the playoffs.
I think that's a very good assessment. Key is going to be if Paul George continues his ascent that we saw in the postseason last year. Yeah. If he's a legitimate star, they can absolutely do it.
Yeah, he's got to be LeBron light, where and we saw in that series last year, he battled LeBron, he was defending him, and he was, containing him. LeBron was still getting his, but LeBron wasn't going off for 40 each game like you might expect him to in the playoffs. George was doing a good job, as good as you're going to do against him. And then he was also getting it done on the offensive end, too, and being that number one scorer that they need.
And you're right. And the way the question was phrased to us was, did any team do enough to get better enough to challenge the Heat? And it's a combination of that and the Heat themselves falling off a little bit.
Yep.
incredibly hard to three-peat, only been done a handful of times. The only other team, I like the two that you said, they're both very good. Chicago seems to be like, they're getting all kinds of sleeper buzz now, especially because Derrick Rose looks fully healthy. What do you think about Brooklyn?
It's, when it boils down to it, it's just going to come down to health for them. I mean, is Pierce, is Garnett, is Darren Williams, who has a lot of nagging leg injuries, are all those guys going to hold up? Not only hold up over an 82-game season, but are they going to be at full capacity when playoff time rolls around? And I'm sure Jason Kidd and that organization, they're going to do what they can to give those guys rest from time to time to try to make sure they do stay healthy. But just a lot of question marks for them. I do like their depth. They have a very good bench.
Depth.
They have Kirilenko, Sean Livingston, Andre Blatch, Reggie Evans. All those guys are coming off their bench with a second unit that was killing the Sixers in the preseason game. The second unit looked better than our starters.
Third unit could probably kill the Sixers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's not saying much, but that's really the largest extent I saw that unit play in the preseason was when I watched the Sixers game. But they look good as a bench unit. So they have a really deep team. They're obviously going to be a 3 or a 4 seed, and they'll be right there.
Could be a 2 seed. I could see them being that good. I really like that roster.
It's a good roster. I just think Chicago and Indiana are too good to really strip away and be one of that 1 or 2 seed in the East. I think Miami's obviously going to be top 2, if not 1, and then one of Chicago or Indiana will be there. Just because Brooklyn, they're going to rest guys. They're going to take nights off and get guys
Garnett's
healthy.
already said he's not going to play more than a certain amount of minutes a game.
Exactly. So they recognize that the end game is a championship ring. It's not winning 60 games and being the 1 seed in the East.
Well, you do want to avoid a really crappy matchup in the first round, though.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to face the Knicks in the first round. You'd rather face, the Wizards or somebody.
Hey, I think the Knicks are going to be pretty bad this year.
Oh, I agree. So that's why we didn't mention them. Potential.
The Wizards might be better than the Knicks this year.
I could see that happening. I haven't really sat down and thought about that, but yeah, it's certainly in the realm of possibility. So
the East is always funny like that because it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter who's 5, who's 8, who's last, because
it's who's gonna go up against Miami and knock them off if anybody.
Correct. And if it's anyone, it's going to be the 2 teams that you set with an outside chance of the Nets. Other than that, there's no one has a hope.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I'd give Brooklyn a puncher's chance if that entire roster's healthy going into a playoff series against Miami, but I think Chicago or Indiana are the main sources of trouble for Miami potentially down the road.
That's just one of a lot of really fun storylines this year in the NBA. It just seems like a very interesting year.
Oh, it absolutely is. So if you want to hear us talk about any of them, readers at home, send us a question regarding those, and we'll be sure to get to it. So that concludes the Week 9 NFL and little NBA talk edition of the 2-on-1 Fast Break podcast. Dan, thanks for joining us this week, and hopefully we'll get a 3-0 week out of you.
I'll be thrilled with 2-1. Good luck, everyone, with whatever you take.
All right. Take care, everyone.